Everybody from London. We are now recording the meeting. Good afternoon and good morning and good evening for those who are attending from around the world. I'd like to welcome you to our fourth part of the Summer London Business Series with John Courtney. Hi, John, how are you?
Hi, Katie. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, lovely to see you too. For those who are joining us from around the world, it's quite warm here in London, so you might see a little breeze flickering in my hair. That's my fan, because there's no air conditioning. So welcome along. My name is Katie Keith and I am the Executive Director for the Global Chamber here in London. We have a great session in store for you today, building boards and advisors. So turn off those emails and WhatsApp messages and take the next hour to really, absorb some of the learning if you are growing or scaling your business, or are you working with companies that are doing that as well? These are great tips from John today. And as someone who has quite a few conversations every week with global leaders who are expanding their operations, one of the things that does come up a lot is how they put the infrastructure around them. And so that's why I've been so delighted to work with John and his team over the last couple of months, delivering the London Summer Business Series, helping people with these challenges. And today is no exception. So building boards and advisors is our topic for today. And for those who are joining us for the first time in the series, John and his global team provide real-world board advisors, part-time CEOs, MDs, non-exec directors, chairmen and paid mentors for scale-ups and SMEs. The team offers services from 1 day per quarter with no recruitment fees, no long-term commitments, and also interchangeable personnel as your needs change and you go along. John brings with him today a world of experience, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing more. So for the next 40 minutes or so, John, you're going to do a presentation. At the end, we're going to open up for Q&A. And just for those people on the call, please pop your details, say hi in the chat, have a bit of chat. I'll be managing that as we go along. I'd love to hear from you. But in the meantime, over to you, John.
Great. Thanks very much, Katie. I'm getting some feedback. I'm not sure if somebody's got sound up a bit loud. No, that sounds a lot better. Thank you. Yeah, welcome. As Katie says, very hot for England. We're really not used to this. 30 degrees, what's that, 90 Fahrenheit roughly. And we're used to 13 and 9 in England. So we're all kind of melting here. So bear with us. Okay, so let me share my screen with you and show you some of the slides. So today we're talking about building boards of advisors. Katie, give me the thumbs up. You make sure you see my screen. Okay. And give me a shout if something goes wrong technically, because I won't be able to see it here. So, so there we go. Okay. So building boards and advisors. So what we're going to cover today. So the plan is this. Why you need to build your board and advising team. That's both when you're raising funds and on a day-to-day basis, because they are slightly different. Your needs are different, and the type of board and the type of advisors you need may be different. What's the difference between chairs, non-exec directors, and board advisors? Some of the answers to that are obvious, some are not. What are the key areas? And we're going to have a quick whiz through strategy and growth as two key areas. Choosing the right people and how to reward board members and advisors. So that's kind of our roadmap today. If that's not of interest to you, then I guess you're probably in the wrong place. Hopefully it is, and we'll whiz through it. Right, Katie was very kind and gave me an introduction and told you a tiny bit about Boardroom Advisors, which was very kind. So I'm not going to spend very long doing this. So Boardroom Advisors, what do? We provide all part-time executive directors, it's part-time finance, sales, marketing, you can read the stuff, but even managing directors, and also chairs and non-execs and so on. We have 100 people, more than that actually. They've all scaled businesses. So they haven't been in a bank for 30 years and done a month's training course. They've all scaled a company, so they can help people do that. Our clients are generally funded startups, scale-ups, and the people who invest in those scale-ups, available immediately, completely flexible, no long-term contract, no recruitment fee, and so on. A lot of our stuff's done on Zoom, in Europe, face-to-face, and hopefully soon around the world. Right, end of advert. Let's crack on. So, bit of housekeeping. It's always funny when you do a webinar and then you finish, and the last slide you don't tell people you're finishing because it's like, well, we're done. And then it's anybody got any questions, and there's a bit of tumbleweed. So please, we know there are questions come up as we go through slides. Please put questions in the chat window. Katie will field them, and we'll go through them at the end if that's okay. Otherwise we kind of lose the flow. And there are some tools here around directors and advisors. And if you want links to these or copy the slides, just stick your details in the chat. And Katie, I think you probably send that out anyway. I don't know, but anyway, you know, if in doubt, put your details in the chat, and do by all means connect with me on LinkedIn. My details are at the end. Okay, so no further ado. Why use advisors at all? Well, listen, I'm crazy. This is business number 7 for me. I'm a serial idiot. I must be absolutely barking mad. I just love creating businesses. Now, I must be honest with you, some of my early businesses I did without any advisors. I kind of did it, and I did it by the seat of my pants. I did it with no training, all gut feel and instinct. And I was kind of lucky that some of them worked out well, but some of that was luck. And you can narrow down the odds really by getting advisors involved. They don't have to be really expensive. The trick is to find really good people and use just a tiny bit of them. I'm not suggesting Richard Branson, but the analogy is, you know, it's better to have an hour of Richard Branson than you know, a week of a manager. I don't know. Terrible analogy. Right. Why use advisors? So you cut down the odds of failure, and you increase the odds of being successful, and the measure of success, which generally is kind of money. So and how, why? You get outside opinion, you get expertise, experience, contacts. They help you plan, kind of get you focused, mentor you, help you train. And the idea really is that you make fewer mistakes, you get to the prize that much quicker, and it releases time, because learning as you go. You know, when I started my first businesses, you know, I knew very little, and I actually, in my first business, I went and I did training videos, and I used to go every Friday afternoon. I used to go to the library. That's how old I am. I used to go to the library and watch these training videos, and they were brilliant. They were excellent, but that kind of substituted for having an advisor. And if I had my time now, I would have done it differently. So there's just some reasons. Types of advisors. So advisors generally are external. So well, these ones are at least. So first of all, there's a chair. Old school chairman, chairwoman, but chair these days. And what do? They chair the board meetings. Now, whether even if you're a small company, you should still be having board meetings. You just kind of have them a little less frequently, and they take a little less time. But you've got to have board meetings. Why? Because that's the place at which you put away the day-to-day stuff and you talk about strategy. Where are we going? How are we going to get there? You know, what are the best routes and so on. You're not talking about day-to-day tactics. And that's kind of one thing. We'll come on to the strategy bit in a minute, but there is a big difference between strategy, which is overall direction, and tactics, which is about the day-to-day stuff to make your strategy happen. And a board meeting is there to talk about strategy. A management meeting in bigger companies, their management meetings, is there to talk mainly about tactics, or should we do it this way? Should we do it that way? So anyway, the chair chairs the board meetings. One of his responsibilities is often strategy, and he does that often in conjunction with the CEO, who he often mentors, either formally or informally. You know, being a CEO it can be a lonely place, and you know, a CEO needs somebody to bounce ideas off. Chair, what do you think about this? Should we do that? You know, that's kind of comes with the territory. Right, other types of external advisors, the NED, non-executive director, NXD, sometimes it's written. So again, it's an external view, and they may be a sector expert or a skills focus, so there might be a marketing person or a finance person or whatever, they as well as being the external voice. Bigger companies, of course, have both chairs and NEDs. Smaller company, probably maybe one or the other. A board advisor, these are the UK terms, I'm afraid. So this is, it's not a legal position. A non-executive director is legally responsible for part of the company. A company's house is a UK term. That's where everybody is officially registered as a director of the company. But a board advisor is kind of just a diluted version of the same thing. There can be a legal term, certainly in the UK, that they might still have some legal responsibilities. In other countries, it'll be slightly different, but it's official or it's unofficial is kind of where we're going here. Board observer is a term sometimes used. It's often used in VC land. It's kind of the same thing as a board advisor, just a slightly different terminology. Consultants, well, yes, they exist. They're advisors. They're often project-based, coming in to do a job and then leave. What we do at Boardroom Advisors is part-time executive directors. So these people in those various skill sets, sometimes they come to board meetings, sometimes they don't, sometimes they're officially on the formal board, sometimes they're not. It depends really. So those are kind of external advisors. And then kind of internal advisors are really what I was just talking about there, the part-time executive directors. So ideal for companies that need director level strategic advice, I get my words out, but don't need, or can't afford a full-time version. Right, let's have a look at some of the key areas that advisors get involved with. So first of all, strategic direction, should be a better word for that. Right, and some of the questions when we're involved with companies, we're looking at strategic direction, often as a part-time executive director, who's responsible, how do you discuss strategy, how do you analyze it, do you do it through a board or an NED, all these sort of questions. And so my general advice, you may be running a 2-person business, you may be running a 2,000-person business. Try and separate strategy and tactics, strategy for the board, tactics for management or for day-to-day. But please do have a look at your strategy. Please think about where is it you want to go and how you're going to get there. So strategy, it gives you a clear purpose and direction. And there are various tools. I'm going to show you some of these in a moment. We use a little package, which is a pretty old school one called SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Really good for getting stuff out on the table. Pretty terrible about doing anything with it, but for the first bit, I find really useful. And we couple that with most analysis, which then takes things from the SWOT and does stuff with it. And then we also, at the moment particularly, but there are other crises other than COVID-19, when there is a crisis around, having a look at a crisis assessment, and we have a tool in order to help through the thought process. And strategy is really the single most important thing that advisors can help with, whether it's the overall business strategy, or whether it's marketing strategy or IT strategy or some other functional strategy. There we go, falling over the teeth again. Right, listen, these tools are a subject of another webinar, which I've done, and they're on the Global Chamber website and on the Boardroom Advisors website as well. So I'm not going to spend too long on this, but just whiz through very quickly. SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. Strengths and weaknesses are internal things. Opportunities and threats are external. And it's just a matter of, preferably in a group, brainstorming, coming up with a list, and you shout around the room. You try and keep strengths and weaknesses to an internal issues. It's all about us, and opportunities and threats, external things. And you just go around the room brainstorming, get it all on a big whiteboard, and then afterwards you analyze and criticize and knock out the weak ones and join things together to make stronger things. But that gets a lot of the issues out on the table, and it's often sometimes surprising how somebody thinks something is a strength and somebody else thinks the same thing is a weakness, and things can be both. It depends partly on your viewpoint, but it can be both an opportunity and a threat, as well as a strength and a weakness. We've got some worksheets which are really quite handy, and I'll show you how to get those in a moment. The thing we join it up with is what we call most analysis. Not many people know about this. This is kind of the early form of OKRs. And I spent a long time at strategy school learning most analysis. As I say, it's subject to another webinar, but briefly, most stands for mission. You can see these things going bottom left and going round clockwise. Mission, which is generally a business mission, keeping it simple to sales and profit. Objectives are the key things that are going to help you achieve the mission. All these are connected, you see. Like my osteopath says, whenever I go in an ache and a pain, he says, strangely, they're all connected. He pokes me on the arm, even if it hurts me on the knee. For each objective, you look at strategies. What are the options to achieve the objectives? Strategy isn't necessarily complicated and difficult. People, I think, a lot of textbooks make it so. It's about what are the options, and then what's the likely best option. And then for each of the options you decide to implement, you have tactics. So timescales, owners, and so on, how they're going to be put into action. And that kind of takes your SWOT and moves it into an action plan, because at the end of the day, in tactics down the bottom right-hand corner, these things go on somebody's to-do list. And when you review your strategy, and in particular your most analysis, then, you know, have things moved on? Have they been successful? If not, what's great about most is it gives you somewhere to go back to if things aren't working quite as well. So you can say, well, you know, tactics aren't working. Was the strategy right? Yes, well, let's have some more tactics. No, well, let's have a look at other strategies that we can look at. So that's kind of a whiz-stop tour of those particular things. But these are great for looking at strategy and strategic planning. And we have, again, worksheets for this. And actually, because everything hangs together, these are really useful, particularly on there. We have a third tool, which is a crisis strategy assessment, which is great for current situation. And it's really just, it's common sense, as most of these things are, but it's kind of like peeling back the layers of an onion. So first of all, defining what the crisis is, and then what's likely to change in the world generally. And then you go down a layer, what might change in your industry? How might it affect your revenue streams? What about your value proposition? Will it affect your customer segments and relationships? Just asking obvious questions, really. What about your distribution channels, your resource needs? You know, more offices? No, likely less offices, I guess. Less travel time. more Zoom, gosh hell. What about your cost structure? Is that likely to be affected? More people, less people, different people? There's so many things that might change. And we're all kind of thinking about this vaguely in the back of our minds, aren't we? But once you've got a worksheet to work through, it just helps you formalize that process. And so here's the worksheet. It kind of looks like that. And all of these tools are available together. We call them a business strategy toolkit. So it's on our resources page. So you just go to resources on the Boardroom Advisors website. That's the home page. Up comes the toolkit. Is that scrolling, Katie? Does that work? No, Katie's not sure. She is, I think. Okay.
It sure is, John. And I'm putting the link in the chat right now for everybody. Okay,
cool. Thank you very much, Katie. So I'm never sure whether this slidey thing works, but it seems to. So that's it. Oh, it's going round again. Excellent. So this is what you see on the page, and there's you just click on the links and download the various tools. Okay, so that's a whistle-stop tour about strategy. The other major area that advisors get involved with is business growth. And again, this is subject to another webinar that I've done with Global Chamber as part of their thing. So these are again the sort of questions that we ask when we walk into the room with clients who want help with growth. Do you discuss it? Who's responsible? Are they at director level? I went into one company once and they had, well, they've been going for 109 years. I remember that. And I said to them, so who's responsible for growth? And there were three of them, and they kind of all looked at each other sheepishly. And I said, okay, let's be more specific. Do you have anybody in marketing? And they said, well, yes, there's Jilly. She's done a university course, and she's just joined us. And that was their, they're a big company. They were 50 million turnover, and they had Jilly who just graduated, responsible for their marketing. I'm sure Jilly was very good, but do you know what I mean? It's particularly a company of that size, even for a company of a small size, having director level responsibility and strategic advice for growth, because that's the core of any business. If you're not growing, you're probably stagnating or going backwards. So, how does the company analyze growth? Do you have help with it? Do you do it at board level, or, with an advisor or an NED? And some of the key areas that we look at, we suggest that you look at around growth. First of all is around, all these questions are around, what is it that you're selling? Again, I'm a great believer that strategy, this is marketing, growth strategy, should be very simple. What is it that you're selling? And if you can't explain that in words of one syllable to potential customers or clients, how are they going to understand? And one of my greatest bugbears is going onto somebody's website and I don't know within 10 seconds what it is that they do. I'm not scrolling around, there's lots of nice words and you're trying to, what's that actually say? So try and say it in words of one syllable. So this is all about establishing the brand, because the brand should say very clearly what it is that you do. So you define the customer needs, you get a value proposition, we'll come to that in a second. That should be a quick sentence really about what it is that you do and why people should buy from you. And then you develop some messaging. So how do you communicate that to people? And so on. And then you look at lead generation, which is who are you selling to? So who are the decision makers? What segments of the market are you selling to? I had one client, lovely client, excellent business, but I said we had a meeting with the four board directors, I think it was, and I said, so who are your customers? And they said, everyone. I said, no, you can't market to everyone. What happens if you try and market to everyone is that your marketing effort gets diluted. So really key to work out who are your key segments that you're trying to get to, who is most likely to buy your goods or your services. And then you can focus your marketing efforts towards that. And what are the routes to the marketing and the marketing channels? It's all about who you're selling to. And then once you've worked that out, it's how are you telling people? So it's what communication channels. There's lots of them, you know, even within social media. There's a list here, you can see it. Even within social media, you know, you've now got 20, 30 different ways of social media. At Boardroom, we concentrate very heavily on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the business channel, isn't it? It's the social media for business. We do a little bit on Twitter as well, because business does use Twitter. We do bits on Facebook, but not very much really, although, you know, the business side of Facebook is getting stronger, particularly with the groups. But in each of these areas, you kind of have to work out, well, first of all, you're working out your segmentation and your messaging, but then it's which of those channels are the best ways of getting that message across to the target audience. You know, public relations is good for some people, trade shows for others, telesales for a third. How are you going to do it, and why? Why is that the best method? And it's just being rigorous about the analysis, the self-analysis that you have, or using, as I say, an external person. Okay, we have a tool called a scale-up growth diagnostic. Equally useful if you're not scaling up. It's a rather grand term, perhaps overused these days. So it's a growth diagnostic, and it's self-diagnosis, which we've developed. It's our IP, and you'll find that again in the resources section. This is the home page again. So you find the resources section, and within there you'll find the scale-up growth diagnostic. The actual tool itself is kind of starts like here, and then it generates a report like this. I'll leave this scrolling, and it goes through 3 different sections: business strategy, sales strategy, marketing strategy. And it's self-diagnosis. You answer the questions, and it cleverly in the background combines them, tells you where you're doing this yourself. It's self-diagnosis, gives you strengths, weaknesses, a to-do list. So if these are your weaknesses, these are the areas that we suggest you focus on. And it gives you marks for each of these. There's an overall mark, as you can see, a mark for each of the 3 sections. Some commentary, as you're seeing now on the screen, hopefully. And then an action list, a priority list. Cool. So rewarding advisors. So lots of different ways of doing this. Some people try and reward advisors, be it chairs or NEDs or whatever, with shares and share options and so on. I know some people think it's a good idea. It's not my favorite way of doing it. I'm a great fan that if you have an external advisor, you should pay him or her for their skills and their time, and therefore a day rate is a better way of doing it. If you're giving them options and shares, you know, the argument is that, you know, they've got skin in the game and they're buying into the company and so on. All this sounds good, but then actually, are they helping you make decisions for the right reasons? Because there's kind of a conflict of interest there. I'm a great believer that advisors should be external and objective, and therefore they're paid for their time and experience. I know I'm not, you know, other people have different views. Anyway, so you can do a fixed fee with an estimated number of days. You can do a day rate, which is kind of my favorite, really. Depends on the size and company and location, but ballpark in the UK, these are only UK figures, and every country obviously is different, but you can see the numbers there. And does it really, the size of the company does make a difference to the fees. Smaller companies would be at the lower end of the scale, larger companies at the bigger end of the scale. But they're still both on the same scale. The trick, I think, when you're a smaller company, still get good advisors. Don't downgrade, my suggestion, my recommendation, don't downgrade to a manager or an executive, or find somebody good, pay the going rate, but use them sparingly if your budget is limited. That's the trick for smaller businesses, in my opinion. So internal advisors, so the sort of stuff that we do, part-time executive directors. Well, we've kind of seen that slide earlier, really. There's nothing totally new there. Right. What to look for in an advisor, whether it's internal or external, these things are still quite useful. A coaching mentality. What do I mean? I don't just mean, leave it with me, I'll get it done, which is kind of nice to hear sometimes, but actually, do you want that advisor there all the time? Or do you want them sharing their experience and their expertise so that perhaps next time you can do it, or your member of staff can do it? You want them to have a coaching mentality. If you're growing, if you're a scale up, if you're scaling up, you want them to have scale up experience. Otherwise, how do they know what to do, what pitfalls? With my 7 businesses, I've made tons of mistakes, tons of them. I really, really try hard not to make the same mistake twice. And if I've got a client, I try and help them not to make any of those mistakes. It's quite important. They should be thinking long term. That's part of their role. If you're in the company, there's a lot of short-term thinking, which is understandable. Somebody has to be thinking a bit more longer term. They have to have some similar values to you, really important, whatever the values are, and a good reputation. Do ask around. And my strong recommendation is to draw up a brief for an advisor. This is an unusual suggestion. Start with a description of the organization, very simple, just a paragraph or 2, it's not a big deal. But then the important bit, what are you trying to achieve by getting this advisor, and why do you need help? Well, I just need an old sage. I don't know what it is. Be really precise about it. I need help growing the business internationally. Oh, okay. Because if that's where you're going, then Fred or Jilly aren't necessarily the right people for you. Be clear about what it is you want to achieve, and what role. They're going to be a mentor, a board advisor, a non-exec, or how in the structure. And one of the interesting things is some people, particularly larger companies, appoint non-executive directors, and they appoint them for sometimes 2 or 3 years, and they go through a recruitment process, but actually they don't really know any better than any other recruitment process as to how that person's going to gel. And again, I'm a great believer, think twice maybe about putting somebody on your board that you don't know. So have them, have somebody you've just met, by all means, with the right skills and experience, but perhaps have them as a board advisor or mentor first. Get used to them, make sure they fit with your culture, that they and the CEO are on the same wavelength. And then when you're comfortable that actually, yes, this is the right person, then perhaps say, well, actually, we need a non-exec, or we need a chair. Do you want to do a formal position? I think that's a better approach. And be clear about what skills and experience you're looking for. Strategy, growth, funding, exit. And perhaps this isn't always possible, but perhaps some goals. So for example, if you want help with growth, well, at what level? Well, we want to double our business in 3 years. Oh, okay. So, you've got some goals to measure people by, and it might frighten some people off, but it's probably good if that's the case. How to find advisors? Well, think about who you already know, who's in your network, but having a friend or a friend's friend or your next door neighbor or something, it isn't always the best way of doing it. If you've got a specification, reach out to industry thought leaders. who's good. Look at their past experience, check them out on LinkedIn. It's so easy these days. And then choosing, you know, have somebody who have some experience with your vertical, but they don't need to be an expert in your sector, really. You should be an expert in your sector. Most advisors, unless you actually need a sector specialist, which is different, but most advisors, you know, as long as they have a working knowledge of your industry, it's actually the rest of the stuff that's important, and you know about your industry and your sector. Not always the case, but most time. They should understand where you're going with the business. You should see a genuine interest in their eyes, not maybe what they say, but look them in the eyes and see how interested they are, and try and judge if there's a chemistry. But maybe don't go into long-term arrangements until you know there's a chemistry in there. That's my suggestion. Oh, crikey, we've got right to the end, and there we are. So, we hopefully.
Thank you, John.
Hopefully we've got some questions. So
We do.
Sorry, Katie, my contact details are there on the screen. Do connect with me on LinkedIn, and there's my email address and the web address. And I'll now stop sharing my screen. Sorry, Katie, I cut you off there. I do apologize.
No, thank you, John. I thought you were finished. Well, thank you very much. That was extremely informative, and we do have some questions actually. And thank you very much, Doug. I'm going to just ask you the first one because I actually wrote that one down as well. How do you articulate the value for an advisor to participate?
Sorry, say that again, Katie.
How do you articulate the value for an advisor to participate in your business?
How do you articulate the value? Can you rephrase that? Sorry, I'm being pedantic here.
Yeah, so I suppose what I was sort of thinking, like, you know, it's sort of the value for having an advisor participating in your business. How do you sort of articulate the value of that and what it brings to the company?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's immeasurable. External advisors, the value that they bring if you have the right advisor, you know, somebody, you know, it's the whole can't see the wood for the trees thing, and often when I'm going into me or one of my colleagues going into a company, some of the answers are like they're staring you in the face, but not because you're brilliant, but because the people around the table, you know, they're all in the room, they're all, you know, they're in the can't see the wood for the trees, so they must be in the trees, mustn't they? You understand what I mean? Just by being the external eyes, it's sometimes obvious what isn't quite working. So I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but
yeah, there's something in that you know, sometimes, you know, the whole dance floor analogy where sometimes you need to step up on the balcony or take a helicopter view down on the business, and I suppose the value in that is having someone do that objectively. Because quite often as business owners and heads of business, we're in it, we're on the dance floor.
Yes.
Yes, so the value would be that, yeah.
Good analogy, Casey, like that.
I really love that. I've used that quite a few times. Because I do think sometimes we get bogged down with the day-to-day. We forget to take a step back and look at the strategic vision of the company as well, so where it's going. So that's really good. Another one is, how do you as a leader of a board ensure that advisors get value from the role?
Does advisors get value, or the company get value from their advisors?
Well, Doug's asked, how do you as a leader of a board ensure that advisors get value? A leader of a board. So maybe there's something in the structure of how you would structure the board itself, and you've got the advisors. How do you ensure that they're getting value from the role?
Well, okay, it's interesting. I think clarity is key. One of the things that the chair is responsible for is not just chairing the actual board meeting, which is obviously very important, but it's the stuff around the edges and being clear about what people's roles are, and how they interlink with each other. The CEO is central to that, obviously, because he's communicating with all the various different advisors, if there are lots, or just one if it's a smaller company. But the chair is a really good name for it, actually, because if you imagine they're kind of moving the chairs around the room to try and get everybody sitting in the right place and next to the right people, and so that's kind of what they do. And in terms of getting value from an advisor, that to me is about right at the beginning, as I say, setting a specification, setting goals, setting timescales. Listen, we want to, double in 3 years' time. That's how we're going to measure you as, you're advising us in that particular area.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about sort of the value both ways and setting it up for success at the onset. And look, we've got a couple more. So the one that Doug has asked here as well is, what term is appropriate and should a particular time be specified? Because I was curious as well, in terms of the costing per day that you were saying, like if I'm a company and I'm investing in an advisor to come in, what's the typical time frame and investment that you would have?
Yeah, that's really difficult to tell. What we try and do at Boardroom Advisors is to say, well, look, each and every month we'll say, are you getting value? If so, how many days do you need this person for next month? If you're not getting value, well, pause it, stop it, whatever, so that the client is in control. So that's one way of keeping control on the situation. How long something's going to take is difficult to tell. We always, when we start with clients, what we often do is we have a strategic review, and we sit around the table, whether it's the whole company or it's their growth strategy or their funding or their exit strategy, whatever it is. You're focused on the core event. You're discussing all the issues, you're using the tools we talked about earlier, but then the advisor then puts together a timeline and says, okay, these are the priorities we've agreed around the table. Yeah, you happy with that? Good. Right. And they puts it in like a Gantt chart to say, well, okay, in order to tackle these issues, I suggest we do this in this time scale, and this in this time scale, and this in this overlapping time scale. And a Gantt chart is very good to give a visual representation of that. And then the client can see, well, okay, it's going to take this long, and therefore it's going to cost this much. Is that something we're comfortable with, or do we want to have reduced timescales or reduced priorities? So you kind of want to do that early on. Otherwise, this advisor's been hanging around for a long time. Crikey, yes, it's cost us quite a lot of money. You need to make sure they're on the right road.
Yeah, and I think that's important, isn't it? If you're making an investment like this, to have some clarity around what the expectation is. And also, just to sort of go back to the value proposition in terms of why an advisor would want to serve on a board, I suppose just to give some information back to the audience is about, what are they getting out of it? The connections, money, satisfaction of helping. So what is really in it for the advisor? Why would they want to be going and doing that?
Oh, right. I've completely misunderstood the original question, haven't I?
That's okay, John.
Yeah, well, people get different things out of it. Some people do it just for the money. I guess that's true. The reward for me is always, when I'm going into a business, it's how, can I help? Am I the right person here? If I can help, how is the best way in which I can help? And it's generally by getting clarity about what they want to achieve and in what timescales. I've gone around that loop again, haven't I? But that to me is very important. And I get satisfaction by helping a client and seeing them move forward. And as an advisor, you're not there all the time. So when you come back in the next time, whether that's the next week or the next month or whatever it is, next quarter even, have they moved on with the things that you helped to put in place? Have they moved on at the speed? It's rarely at the speed at which everybody hoped to, because it's always a wish list, isn't it, on time scale? But are things moving in the right direction? Do you feel that you're providing value? Because if you feel you're providing value for the client is probably getting value. But if I'm not sure, I tend to ask, are you getting value? Are we doing the right stuff? Are we going at the right speed? Just so you get feedback from the clients. But yes, to further answer, some do it just for the money. Some do it, I think most do it for the reward of helping clients get better. It sounds corny, but Yeah, that's why I'm a cricket coach. I don't get paid. I'm an amateur cricket coach. I do it for the joy of seeing you help somebody and seeing them improve.
Mm.
And that's why I sports coach. And when I'm an advisor, it's not that dissimilar. I'm just using different experience and different skills.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, so the financial reward is quite good as well. And do you sort of, how do you sort of deem what's appropriate in terms of what you pay an advisor? Do you come up with some agreement, or are there set standard rates out there that people are typically putting in place? And also legal requirements with different countries, because we've got quite a global spread of companies.
Yeah.
Are there certain things that businesses should take into consideration around the legalities, the cost, what their flexibilities are and what they should look for?
Okay, yep. Several questions there. Yes, certainly as far as the international stuff is, yeah, each country is different. I've been a company director in the UK for, gosh, 45 years. So I know some of those rules and regs. So I'm familiar with those, but in different countries, you know, we take advice from our regional directors who are in those countries, because that's where they've developed. Sorry, what's the first part of your question, Katie?
Yeah, so I suppose, yeah, I know, that's all right. So I think, yeah, you've sort of answered that. There's different sort of regulations around how companies are structured and what are some of the legal ramifications for companies that are across borders, I suppose. And there's lots of layers to that. So if you're going to have advisors in different countries, spread out across the business, how do you sort of make sure that you're costing that correctly with those advisors as well?
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Again, there's no one answer to that. I'm going to dodge answering that directly because you can't. The key always is clarity with the client. And you say, look, you know, we're dealing in 4 different countries. There are different regulations. There's different time requirements, maybe different people. You know, just be transparent and clear. You know, this is what we see as the situation. Here's a suggestion about how we tackle it. What do you think? And if you do that, you can't go terribly wrong. Client isn't always going to want to do it the way you want to do it, or perhaps at the volume you want to do it. But if you're clear about it and you communicate openly, you can't go too far wrong, I think.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned something there which is really quite important. And we were talking about this the other day ourselves. And I think there is something about the fact that you've got advisors in different country locations that are really skilled up on what their requirements are legally, the cost frameworks, and how they can support companies on the ground. I think that's quite important, that there's those resources available to you. And I know off the back of that, you know, we're going to run an additional event to wrap up the series and have some of these advisors on to talk with you about what they're doing in the local countries.
What a great segue that is, Katie. Well done.
Well, I think that's a great opportunity. And on that note, thank you, everybody, for your questions. I just want to say thanks, John. This is the 4th part of our series. You've provided us with a wealth of information about scaling up, coming out of COVID, putting boards and advisors together, some of the tools and resources that you've provided to us with your SWOT analysis. And then you had one today, which I really loved, which was the most analysis, which is your mission, objectives, strategies, and tactics. And that's something got me thinking as well about how I'm operating in my business. So I wanted to say thank you very much for your time over the series. We do have another one coming up on the 14th of October at 4 p.m. and an invite will go out to everybody. And that's where we're going to have John and his board advisors with him on a call where we can actually ask questions. We can go through all of this and we can actually be one-to-one in the room with you. So thank you very much, John. And thanks to all those who have attended today. Also, another plug from me as well now, we've got our London Global Chamber meetup coming up on the 10th of August at 4 p.m. Last month, we had 55 people join the call. It was really energetic. It was amazing. I'm still getting phone calls and emails saying how amazing the event was and how many people they connected with. So I'd love to see you there. John, I'm hoping you'll be there as well because I'm sure people will be wanting to connect with you. And for those who are new to the Global Chamber, we are a unique, we're the first and only Chamber of Commerce located in hundreds of locations around the world. We're pretty much everywhere. And if you're a leader who is seeking additional growth with your company beyond just one metro area, say London or New York, join us to connect and grow. You can leverage off the global tribe for more productive success. We're making doing business simple and easy. It should be just as easy as doing it down the street as it is around the world. So come and join us. Don't be shy and get in touch. John, thank you very much.
Katie,
it's been a pleasure.
Delightful. Thank you for your time. Thank you everybody for listening. Do connect with me on LinkedIn.
Yes, please connect. All the links are in the chat. We will be sending out the slides. Thank you, Ruby. I saw your message there. We'll be sending everything out. And thank you very much for all of those who have connected with us over the series. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, John.